Welcome everybody. Now, lot of students are already joined our previous session. So this is a part of our complete undergraduate application process. The first part we had completed last month. Now this is a second part which is there. And with me is Dr. Donald Martin and Miss Deborah. As you may be knowing, Dr. Donald Martin has been a Dean of Admissions, a Dean of Students at Columbia University, which is Ivy League University, University of Chicago, Booth School of Business. She was admitting the students there, Northwestern University, Wheaton College, almost more than 40 years of experience and more than 1,25,000 applications he was evaluated. And since 2008, he has been working with students, parents across 50 countries. He's a columnist, former columnist at USNEWS and World Report. And he last year he came to India also, and we had a lot of student interaction sessions. We visited many universities. So he is a celebrity academician in United States with such a great exposure. So today we are going to talk about from his experience. You will not find all this information in any of the websites or anything. It is coming from personally from his own experience. And along with him is Ms. Deborah, who has extensive experience in handling the undergraduate. We are running the mentoring program where we are guiding the students from 9th standard, and she has been guiding fantastically to students. And today we are one of the very successful organization because we purely works on merits and we work on to the student-centric way. With this introduction, I will request Dr. Donald Martin to take this session, and then we move forward.
Thank you so very much, Dr. 𝐸𝐻, and hello, everyone. It is a pleasure to be with you once again for this, our fifth and final undergraduate webinar series of 2023. And it has been such a pleasure to work with Dr. 𝐸𝐻 and the team at 𝐂𝐡𝐞𝐞. I, again, just want to say he never asks me to say this. He doesn't always know that I'm going to, but the 𝐂𝐡𝐞𝐜 Academy, from my experience and what I've learned in the pleasure of working with Dr. 𝐸𝐻 and his team over almost 12 years now, this is by far the best educational preparation organization in India. And if you are working with them or you've become involved with them, you're very fortunate. They do things the right way, and they truly help students to prepare in the right way so that when Ms. Debbie and I work with these individuals, they're already doing very well, and we're able to kind of, what we might say, put the finishing touches on what has already been some incredible prep work that the 𝐂𝐡𝐞 team has done. So I am delighted, Ms. Deborah, we are both extremely honored, truly, to be part of the extended 𝐂𝐡𝐞 team here in the US. And we, again, so much appreciate that you took time to join us today. We know there's a festival taking place in India, and we hope it's a wonderful time for all of you. So thank you for sparing this hour to spend this time with us. So what are we going to talk about today? Well, this is, as Dr. 𝐸𝐻 said, this is the second of a two-part series or two-part presentation on the actual application process for studying at the undergraduate level in the US. We're going to start off by talking about something I like to present in every webinar that I ever give. Those who work with me probably could say this as much as I can because they hear it every time. But I'm going to talk about the biggest mistake prospective undergraduate students make. Then Ms. Deborah is going to join us. She's going to cover preparing your essays and addressing potential weaknesses in your application. I'll get back to talk about doing a possible interview. That is possible. It doesn't always happen, but it is a possibility. And responding if you're placed on the waiting list or if you're denied. Then we'll have some closing remarks. And then Dr. 𝐸𝐻 has graciously offered to come back on If there are any questions that you would like to ask us, that's our favorite part of this whole thing, is being able to answer your questions. So please, at any point during our time that we're sharing with you, if you have a question, please type it in the chat box so that Dr. 𝐸oris can take a look, and then he will facilitate that part at the conclusion of our comments today. So, Ms. Debbie, I'm going to ask you to just stay right on here with me, because I'm only presenting one first point, then I'm going to turn it over to you. So I'm going to, and by the way, it is great to have you back with me. Welcome. I love doing these webinars with you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Don. It's great to be here this evening.
Okay, so what is the biggest mistake that prospective college students make? And by the way, this happens worldwide. It happens just as much in the United States as anywhere else, and certainly in India. It happens every year, and I'm saddened that it does, because it can really make a difference in terms of your overall enjoyment of your undergraduate experience. So if I were to ask you to take just 10 seconds here, obviously I'm not going to ask anyone to answer this out loud, but what do you think is possibly the biggest mistake if you are listening to this as a student in the 9th, 10th, 11th standard? Perhaps you are a guidance counselor or a teacher or an administrator. You're listening to this today. What do you think is the biggest mistake prospective college students make? Okay, now there are several. There isn't just one, but of the mistakes that sometimes are made, this to me is the biggest one. And here it is: not doing adequate research before you apply. This is very, very important. Just to give you an idea, there are between 3,000 and 4,000 accredited colleges and universities in the United States. That's quite a few. And what is troubling to me is that sometimes students only focus on some sort of a ranking, or they've heard the name of an institution that is highly regarded. Now, please don't hear me saying that there's anything wrong with aspiring to go to a very well-regarded university. That's fine, but there's more to it than that. You need to really have some understanding about what this university is like. And one of the things we do in our work with a student, Ms. Deborah and I, we do something called shortlisting, where we actually will provide you with a list of several options. It could be as many as 40, 45. We provide you with quite a few. Now, obviously, you're not going to apply to all 40 or 45 of those institutions by any means. But the point we're making is, let's say you're interested in psychology, biology, computer science, becoming a medical doctor. You want to go to medical school eventually. Did you know that there could be as many as 500 phenomenal programs in these fields? And you owe it to yourself to take some time to learn about these programs before you decide where you're going to apply. So in other words, remember, your perception about the institutions you're thinking about should come after you've taken some time to do some research on them. It's not where you start out. In other words, you don't want to just say, okay, I'm going to choose these 6 schools that I've heard about and that I think are pretty good, and that's the end of it. You want to take some time to do some good research. So please, as you think about this, please do good research. Now, as we move into a discussion about some specific components of the application process that we're going to talk about today, let me just mention, overall, in my experience, in the 40-some years that I have been doing this in discussions with Ms. Deborah, there are 3 parts of your application over which you have the most control, that you can kind of you have charge of these, and they are preparing your recommendations, confirming and asking recommenders who it is that's going to recommend you, and then providing them some good information to help them do a good recommendation letter. And then the two things that you kind of write yourself are your resume and essays. These are they're critical components of the application. On October 21st, when we did our first webinar, the application process part 1, we talked about the first two of those, recommendation letters and resumes. Today, we're going to talk about your common application and supplemental essays. That's a big part of this. This is the other part you can control. So I'm now going to turn it over to Ms. Deborah, who's going to actually be going through some very important tips for you, 10 of them actually, about your essays. And following that, she's going to share some information, very important as well, on another part of the application, which is called addressing some potential weaknesses that you might have or liabilities that you need to address. So with that, it's my pleasure now to turn the microphone back over to my colleague, Ms. Deborah. Ms. Deborah, there you go.
Well, thank you, Dr. Don, and it's a pleasure to be here this evening. And we will start by talking about this very important topic, as Dr. Don shared, and that is preparing your essays. So whether you're thinking about doing this or perhaps you are writing your essays now, we hope that these 10 tips will be very helpful to you. Well, let's get started. Tip number 1, allow the time you need to prepare excellent documents. Please do not wait until the last minute. If you do, this could mean making unintentional and, as we've written here, completely avoidable mistakes. Writing quality essays takes time. This is not something that you are just going to sit down and do in an hour or two. And for most students who are applying to multiple schools, maybe 7, 10, 15 schools, that's a lot of essays if they all have supplemental essays attached. So you need to allow time on the front end for this process so that you can write quality essays. Tip number 2, moving right along. And this might seem very simple, but it says follow directions. Many times students fail to look at the questions and see what is being asked of them. Sometimes there is one question in an essay prompt, and sometimes there are 2 or 3. So you want to be sure that not only you are answering the questions that are asked, but that you answer them in the order of which they're asked. And also that you read and understand the word limit. If there is a range, you probably want to err on giving them a little bit more information. If it's a 200 to 400 essay, you want to give them a little bit more towards the 400 word mark, but you certainly don't want to go over the suggested requirement. So make sure you read your directions, especially as through different applications, you may have a similar topic, but the directions for different schools might not be the same. So take your time with that. Tip number 3, before you sit down at your computer to write, or if you like to use a pen and paper, we would like you to think about creating an outline. And before you create your outline, use bullet points or little slashes, however you like to brainstorm. And just think about everything that you might like to talk about. First, you can write that down. The order doesn't matter. And then at some point, put that together in an outline. You may, for some essays, need more content than others. So having a lot of information is helpful. And then you can delete what you don't need or even add things to a different essay. So just start by really thinking and brainstorming and taking time before you just go ahead and plow into your essay. Tip number 4. Where appropriate, to start your essay, you can use a compelling quote or a story. But don't try to force this if you don't have something that you think would be appropriate. Many students don't know exactly how to start their essay. If you don't have a particular quote or a story, You can start with the question that was asked, repeating part of it or all of it, and some students like to start their essay that way. Many students have an inspirational quote or something that means something to them, and they like to start with that. Or perhaps they have a challenging circumstance that they went through or a story to share. So think about how you might like to start your essay and use the information that you have that tells the admissions committee more about yourself. Tip number 5, let the reader hear your voice through your essay. Your essays are a chance for you to talk to them. And we suggest pretending that you're in a room with the admissions committee and they're actually reading you the questions and you're answering them. Now, obviously, with your essays, you want them to be polished, have good grammar, and use good vocabulary. But as you write, have it come from your heart and write as if you would talk and if you were speaking to them in person. Tip number 6. After writing your first draft, take some time to read it aloud. Now, this may sound funny, and sometimes students will say, well, I already read that to myself. Well, when you read something off the computer or on paper silently, your brain sometimes can play a little trick on you. It can fill in the information because you know what you're trying to say. But something happens when you read a document out loud and you hear it. And we've had students read a document and start reading it and say, oh, wait, there's a misspelling, or, oh, I didn't mean to say it that way. So start by reading it out loud. And then you can decide if you like it, if you want to make changes. So this is a very helpful tip that we'd like to give our students as you are working through the essay process. Tip number 7, please check for spelling and grammar. This is so important. And don't just rely on the spell check on the computer, because if you have a duplicate word or a phrase that doesn't sound right, if you have contractions, sometimes that is not picked up. So at the end of your process, you want to take time to read your document out loud, to look at it, and to just polish it the best that you can, because you want to do the best work with your essays that you can. Tip number 8, ask someone else to read through your essay, but think carefully about who you ask. Now, you may start with a friend or family because they're close to you to see how your first draft is going. And of course, they have your best interests at heart, but they also know you very well. So we suggest having maybe a more objective person read your essay, perhaps a teacher or guidance counselor or application expert, someone who maybe knows you a little bit, but can look objectively at your essay and say, are you answering the questions? Do you understand do they understand what you were writing? So take some time and get some feedback from others and see how your essays are coming across. Tip number 9, make sure you send the correct essay to the correct location or destination. And you may say, well, of course I'm going to do that. Well, if you were just applying to 1 or 2 schools, you may not have to worry about that. But as we said before, students are applying to multiple schools, and they also may have multiple essays in those schools. So you really want to make sure that you are uploading the proper essay. Sometimes there is content that's similar. A student will have the same theme or idea for 2 different schools, but those questions are different. So just make sure that you are taking the time to send the right essay to the right school. And finally, tip number 10, just be yourself through this process. And as Oscar Wilde, the poet, said, everyone else is already taken. Please know that when admissions committees are looking at applications, they are not trying to admit a freshman class of people who are all the same. Students who have the same grades, the same test scores, the same interests. They want diversity. So let them hear your voice. Let them know how you are special and how you may be a good fit for their program. Well, let's switch gears a little bit from our essays and talk about potential weaknesses that may arise as a student is working on their application. The first one that comes to mind is grades. Sometimes a student will feel that their grades are not as competitive as they would like them to be. For example, they had a semester where they had a very difficult time and their grades dropped. Or we've had students who are straight A's across the board, and there's 1 or 2 classes where they really struggled, even though they worked very hard. Well, this is something that you want to address and acknowledge, because chances are, if you notice this on your transcript, the admissions committee will notice it too. And the best way to do this is be forthcoming, perhaps use an optional essay either in the Common App or for a particular school, and share the situation so that the admissions committee will understand that. The second thing that comes to mind with potential weaknesses are test scores. Some students do great on standardized tests, and some really struggle. We've had straight A students who study and study for the SAT or ACT, which are very important tests, and they don't do as well as they thought they could do, and they don't feel that it truly reflects their academic potential. So this is something, once again, that you want to acknowledge and explain, not making excuses, but giving the admissions committee some information about that as they are reviewing your application. A third point that may come into play is a student who may not have any activities or few extracurricular or volunteer activities. This can be as a result of illness, death in the family, sometimes even a financial hardship, where a student has to work a part-time or full-time job. It could also be a very rigorous academic schedule at one school. So this is information, again, that you want to share via an optional essay, or perhaps there's an essay for that particular school that addresses this type of situation, and explain to them how you're meeting this challenge. And finally, of course, if there's an extended absence from school, which would be several weeks or a month, and this could be from illness as well as a student relocating or moving. With all these weakness situations, the best thing is just to provide information. You don't want to leave any questions unanswered for the admissions committee, so that as they're looking at your information, they can have all the information about you, see what is unique and special about you, and see if you would be a good fit for their college or for their university. Well, now I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Don, who will continue with another important part of our application process, and that is the potential interview situation. Dr. Don?
Ms. Deborah, beautifully done. Thank you so very much. And yes, let's now discuss for a moment possibly having an interview with the admissions committee at the institution or institutions you're applying to. Now, most likely, if you are in India, you will not be coming over to the United States to have this interview in person. This will be done virtually, most likely what we're doing right now on a Zoom call. And what you want to make sure that you do, if this is asked of you, is make sure that the setting for which your interview is taking place, what they see behind you, looks okay. You can see behind me are some vertical blinds in my office. There's a chair with a very nice lamp to the left. There's actually over to on this side right there a few gifts from my recent visit to India. I have more around my home, but those are two right there. You saw Ms. Deborah has a very nice office background. Dr. Dioris has one. In other words, you don't want your interviewer to be distracted by what's taking place behind you. You want it to be calm, you want it to be serene, and you want it to be nice looking. So make sure you take some effort to prepare. I've had meetings with students. There in the background was a bureau with drawers open and clothes all over the place, or you could see their bed and it was unmade. Those are things that you don't want to do. That leaves a very bad impression. So make sure that your setting is adequate and is professional and is nice looking. Secondly, obviously, you want to dress appropriately. For boys or girls, This is not the time to wear a t-shirt or a sweatshirt with a hoodie or something like this. This is a formal interview, and they may actually give you some sort of information about how you should dress. But my sense is either you might be dressing, if for guys, you might dress like I am with a dress shirt. You probably wouldn't have to wear a tie, but a nice dress shirt. For women, as you saw how Ms. Deborah is dressed today, very professional. She doesn't look like she just came in from the gym. She looks like she was prepared in a professional sense, as I did, to do this presentation. So these two things may seem, again, a little bit less important, but really they aren't. First impressions, as they say, are lasting impressions. Or another way to say it, you don't get a second chance to make a first impression. These things will absolutely make a positive or negative impression depending on how you handle them. Number three, this is very important. You need to maintain good eye contact with your interviewer, even if you are meeting them virtually. What do I mean by this? Well, I'm going to lean in just a little bit more for this for just a moment. If you notice right now, I believe you would think that I am looking right at you as I say these words. Why? Because I am not looking down at the screen to see you. I'm not looking on my computer screen. I am focused solely on the camera that is at the top in the middle of my particular computer screen. There's a little green light actually that comes on when that camera is in use. And when I'm talking with you today like this, I'm looking at that camera so that you get a sense that I'm looking at you and maintaining eye contact. Now you may need to practice this. Our temptation is to look at the person on the screen as they're talking with us, or more importantly, as we're talking with them, rather than looking in the camera. So please make sure you practice this so that the interviewer, when someone doesn't look at us while they're talking with us for long periods of time, that raises a red flag. Why are they not looking? Why is he not or she not looking at me? What's going on? So this is, again, very important. You need to practice this and make sure to maintain. Now, you don't have to stare at the person the entire time. You can look away. You could look down for a moment. But when you're talking with them, most particularly, when you are talking with them, you need to look at them and maintain good eye contact. Next, make sure that you answer the questions that you're asked, but don't go on and on and on. Now, there's a temptation when you're doing an interview. This is your chance to actually talk with the admissions committee live. You're no longer speaking with them through an essay. You're actually speaking with them yourself. And some applicants are so excited about this that they get a little bit too long-winded and they start going on and on and on. Please keep in mind, the less time you spend on some of these questions, answering them, the more questions they'll ask you so that they can get to know you better. Now, obviously, on the other end of the spectrum, you don't want to spend 30 seconds answering a question either. You want to make sure you answer it, but just be careful. If you get beyond, now this may seem like a very short amount of time when I say it, let's say 2 minutes. But when you're talking, 2 minutes can be a long time and may give you plenty of time to cover what you've been asked. That's your focus. Answer the questions with what they've asked you to discuss, but just be careful. I had one interview, now granted, this is an extreme case, but I had one interview where I asked the first question and that was the last question I asked because the applicant just talked for the next 25 minutes. I never asked another question. And what they said was interesting, it was helpful, but it left a very bad impression with me that they in effect took over that interview. That is a no-no. You want to answer the questions, take some appropriate time, a minute or two. You don't have to, as I said, you don't have to make it only 30 seconds, but please do not ramble. That does not help you. Next, there's a fine line in life, in all of our interactions with people. There's a fine line between what we would call confidence and arrogance. Here again, applicants are often said, you need to be confident. You need to show the admissions committee that you are, you're very confident and you're sure of yourself. Well, if you take that too far, you cross a line between being somewhat confident in yourself to becoming very arrogant and making it sound like you really think you are something else. Compliments about your character, about who you are as a person, should be left to your recommenders, not to you. If you're asked, for instance, what is one of your strong points? You could be asked this as a question. You want to be very careful in how you answer that. I'm going to try to give you an example between confidence and arrogance. Let's say someone said to you, would you please share with us what you believe one of your strong points is? And you said, I was given the award for the very best student in my class in the 10th standard. No one else achieved this but me. How do you think that sounds? I would say that sounds arrogant. Now, let me share with you again. I'm going to answer that in what I would call a more confident manner. Tell us, what is one of your strong points? Well, I was very honored that I was awarded the best student in my 10th standard class. This was something I didn't expect, and it was really a very high honor. I was very humbled. Do you see the difference? You said the same, you told them the same information, but there's a way to say it, especially when you're talking about yourself, and there's a way not to say it. So be careful to maintain that fine balance and focus on being confident in your answers. Don't go over to the side of being arrogant. Another very important tip here, if this interview takes place, keep your cool no matter what happens. Let's say you lose your train of thought. This has happened to me. I'll be talking sometimes, I'm sure it's happened with Ms. Deborah, with Dr. Dioris, with others that I speak with quite regularly. I'll be talking and then I'll say, oh my gosh, I just forgot what I was going to say. This happens to all of us. Or you say the wrong word. You get tongue twisted and you say something. The worst thing you can do is to exaggerate that and focus on it and get all upset. Oh, I can't believe I did that. I'm so stupid. I'm so sorry. Please forget. No. If you make a mistake, if you say the wrong word or you start saying, something, you can just say, I'm sorry, I meant to say this word. And then you go right on. If you don't bring a lot of attention to it, the interviewer won't. They won't even remember it by the time the interview is over. I promise. I've done thousands and thousands of interviews, and you don't draw attention to a mistake. You acknowledge it, you correct it, but you don't belabor it. You don't keep discussing it. Similarly, if you lose your train of thought, if you're in the middle of an answer and somehow it just something happens and you be honest, just stop and say, and I know this is easier for me to do than if this actually happened to you, but nonetheless, you could just say, I lost my train of thought. Let me start over, or let me regain that, and take a few seconds. And then you pick up and just keep going. Keep your cool. You know what? In a way, if that happens to you, that gives you a chance to show the admissions committee what you're made of, that you can handle a mistake, that you can handle losing your train of thought and it doesn't completely cause you to disintegrate, that you can keep right on going. That's actually, you could turn that into a very positive impression with the admissions committee. And lastly, have some good questions to ask when the time comes. Most likely at the end of an interview, the interviewer will probably say something like, are there any questions you would like to ask me? Now, be careful. You don't want to ask 5 to 10 questions. This is not the time for that. But you should have maybe 1 or 2 questions that you'd like to ask. And let me give you a little inside tip here. The kinds of questions you want to ask are not questions where the answer is already provided on the website or through written information you've received from this university or college. No, you want to ask questions that show you did your what? What did we talk about at the beginning of the webinar? What's the mistake you can make? You want to show that you did some research, that you already know some things about this institution. And what you want to do is ask for a little more. For instance, let's say that there is a student organization on this campus that is very appealing to you, and you've read about it. You've seen what they, let's say that it's called the Giving Something Back Club, where they go out into the community and do some community service. You could say, I'm very interested in the Giving Something Back organization on campus. Can you tell me what some of their recent projects have been? That's a very good question. That shows you already did your research. You know about this group, but you'd like to know a little more. Those are the kinds of questions, again, that can be very impressive to an interviewer that lets them know, you know what, this applicant really is interested in us. They took the time to ask a question about something, you know, related to our program that is unique only to us. So if you have a potential interview, here are some things. And, you know, I just thought of another one I probably should add for future. One of the first ones I would say is practice answering some of the questions you think you'll be asked. That's another one. I just thought of that. Make sure that you spend some time, maybe with a friend, maybe with a person like Ms. Deborah or myself, where we would actually walk you through a practice. This is something that through Astute Academy, we can offer to you. So if that's, make sure you do practice. Now, you may not always have all the questions that you're going to be asked. You may not practice all of them, but just getting comfortable practicing alone or by yourself or with someone who's advising you can also be very helpful. Okay, we're coming now to the, oh, I'm sorry, I missed one more. Oh, and I'm so glad I brought this up on the screen. When you're finished with your interview, make sure you send a thank you message to the interviewer. Just telling them, you know, thank you for taking the time. I really enjoyed speaking with you. If they said something that you really resonated with, tell them. You could say your comment about such and such was something that really resonated with me. And if you feel this way, you could end by saying, my interest in such and such university has increased as the result of this opportunity that I had to meet with you. So make sure you do thank your interviewer. And next time I'll add number 9 or whatever, wherever I put it, make sure to practice those interview questions. Okay, now we're going to move to, this is a little bit of a shorter part of our webinar, but I did want to spend a little time mentioning what happens if you send your application in and you find out you've been waitlisted or denied. This is not fun. No one is thrilled about being placed on a waiting list or being denied. Of course, nobody wants to have that be the situation, but it does happen. Enrollment officers are given certain guidelines at the beginning of each academic season. This was how it was for me. I met with my direct supervisor, usually a vice president or the president of the institution, and they would say to me, Don, here are the number of students we want you to bring in next fall. And not only that, here's what we want this group to look like. We want this many men. We want this many women. We want this many international students, this many US citizens, and so forth. There were several criteria that were given to me, and that's something I was obligated to follow. And so as it stands to reason, most universities receive far more applications than they have seats available in the class. So the admissions dean enters into the evaluation process knowing that he or she will not be able to admit everyone who applies. You should go into the process with that same approach, Not everybody that applies to this university is going to get in. So that means that even if I have a good application, that may not be a guarantee that I'm going to be admitted. You're looking at someone who was not admitted the first time. When I applied for my PhD program to Northwestern University the first time, I was not admitted. I felt I had a good application, and I'm guessing that I must have, because when I applied the second time, I got in. And my application was not that much different the second time I applied. So just remember, if you do not get admitted, if you are denied, or excuse me, if you are waitlisted, this is not personal. This is not a judgment about your ability to do undergraduate work. Not at all. It's simply a matter of the admissions dean having a very difficult decision choosing who will be admitted each year. If you are waitlisted, this is point number 3. This is very important. Many applicants assume that if they've been waitlisted, they are this close to being denied. It's just like they're leading you on, they're moving you along to the point where they're going to deny you. That is the exact opposite of what's going on. If you are waitlisted, that means you're this close to being admitted. And if you follow the instructions you've been given, if you let them know in a very professional way, in a very upbeat way, thank you for letting me stay on the waiting list. I am still so interested in your university. What else can I do? Is there anything else you need from me? Make sure you do that. And this is not, they're not doing this to test you, but this is what we might call a practice opportunity for you as to how you're going to handle what initially will be a disappointment. Of course, you wanted to be admitted, but being placed on the waiting list is not bad. In my experience, I would say probably 70 to 75% of those waitlisted end up getting admitted, not denied. So please take this to heart. You're not one step from being denied. You're one step from being admitted. If you are denied, and this was your first choice, as was the case with me. Northwestern was my first choice. I knew I could do that work. I knew I could do it there. I wanted to study there. So I waited and applied again. Consider reapplying. And once again, your chances of admission increase dramatically when you reapply. Many applicants think, oh my gosh, I got denied the first time. That's it. No matter if I apply again, I'll be denied again. Absolutely not. It's the opposite. Most of those, when I was at Columbia, Chicago, Northwestern, Wheaton, who reapplied, they got in. And so consider that, discuss it with the admissions committee. Let them know you'd like to reapply. Ask what you can do. This is not, neither one of these decisions is truly the end of the road. It might be a little bend, but it's not the end of anything. Okay? Well, those are our 4 main points that we wanted to address today. In closing, in review, to sum up, again, as Ms. Deborah said earlier, and Ms. Deborah, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask you to come back on now and let folks have, there you go. As Ms. Deborah said, let the admissions committee hear whose voice? Your voice. There's only one of you. There's only one of any one of us. So let them hear your voice. If you have some less than competitive credentials, Ms. Deborah shared some ideas of how to deal with that. And remember, you are not alone. In fact, I'm going to say this right here. In all of my 28 years of evaluating those over 125,000 applications, I never, ever met what I would call a perfect applicant, ever. There's no such thing. There are outstanding applicants. There are very strong applicants. No one has a perfect application. So you may, if you think, well, oh my gosh, I'm really in trouble because my grades were low or I didn't have this or that, join the club. That's what I would say. You're part of a very strong group of applicants. Number 3, remember, if it is conducted, if you're asked to interview, take advantage of it. It's very important. The interview where it can happen allows you to come off the page. You become alive to them. They can see you. They can talk with you. Don't minimize the importance. An interview can make or break an application. It can take, if up until the point they interview you, you're great, you look great on paper, everything's wonderful, but then you blow the interview, you're going to be denied. I can tell you that right now. So make sure you remember this is the chance for you to hit a home run, hit it over the ballpark edge and be admitted. And lastly, being waitlisted or denied is absolutely not the end. It's a bend. It is not the end by any stretch. Okay, now, should you be thinking about joining the Astute Prep program, the Astute Academy program, and you would be working with Ms. Deborah and I if you were to do that, we want to share with you a little bit about the work that we've done. As I said, we've been in close association with Astute now for over 13 years. It's been an absolutely phenomenal collaboration. We have been very fortunate to have so far a very high acceptance rate of the students that we've worked with. Last year, we had 6 individuals, and every single one of them were admitted with a scholarship. It's been a very, very successful program in terms of helping you prepare good applications so that you will be admitted to several programs and have a choice of where you might want to attend. We actually start our undergraduate mentoring program as early. We are, Ms. Deborah and I just finished. We meet quarterly with our undergraduate mentoring students. And just recently, in the past couple of weeks, we've met with all of them for this October-November meeting time. And many of them are in the 9th standard. We start as early as that standard. In fact, we think the sooner you start working in this capacity, the better. You have more chance to really plan ahead, build your profile, and really be ready to submit those applications. We can assist, as I mentioned earlier, we do a school search, which we call a shortlist. We can help you with your resume. We do a lot of essay review. We've discussed recommenders and much more. We are able to step in and help wherever you would like us to, in conjunction with a very strong team of individuals at Astute who we work with. When you add those into the mix, there are 4 of us. 2 with Astute and Ms. Deborah and I, and the 4 of us work together and have just had some wonderful experiences with our students. Okay, that ends the portion of the webinar that Ms. Deborah and I are sharing today. Thank you for your attention. Thank you for your patience. We hope this information has been helpful. As Dr. 𝐸𝐻𝐸 said, much of this, I don't believe you're going to find on a regular website. I truly, this is based on 40-some years of experience. And I'm now going to practice being confident as opposed to being arrogant when I say what I'm going to say. And that is, following these tips that we provide, it really does work. It really does make a difference. Now, I could have said, if you follow my tips, you will be, no, that's arrogant. We're not talking arrogant here, but I can confidently, along with Ms. Deborah, tell you that the things we've shared with you today actually work. They make a difference. I hope it's okay, Dr. 𝐸𝐻𝐸, for me to share that I've also, for many years, worked with prospective graduate students with Astute. And once again, some of the tips that we've been able to provide over the years, Dr. 𝐸𝐻𝐸 and myself, this has been been a very successful venture. Our students get admitted and they have the opportunity to further their education. So we would just welcome a chance to work with you if that is something you're interested in. But now I'm going to stop talking and turn the microphone back over to Dr. 𝐸𝐻𝐸. We hope there are some questions that you might have put in the box. If not, put them in now. We love questions. There's no bad questions. We'll stay here and answer as many of them as we can for you. So Dr. 𝐸𝐻𝐸, first of all, thank you for giving Ms. Deborah and I this opportunity to have done this webinar series for Astute this year. It's been our pleasure. It continues to be our absolute pleasure working with you and your team. You do a phenomenal work. You really do. I wish there were other organizations in other countries doing the work that Astute has done. It's absolutely amazing. So thank you for giving us this opportunity, and I will now turn it back to you.
Yeah. Thank you very much. This was, again, as usual, excellent session with Dr. Donald Martin and Ms. Deborah. And really, this is the information you will not find anywhere. The tips, every tip is so critical for your application process because you need to stand out in the crowd. There are, as Dr. Donald Martin has said, there are large number of applications and there are very, very few seats. In particularly premier institutions, there are 100,000, close to 1 lakh or more applications nowadays are coming. And which is such a large pool of applications which is coming, you need to be very competitive, you need to have, and that is how we have the mentoring program. I know this is a festive season and Diwali is approaching. Already we have the first day of Diwali. But if you have any questions, please type in a question answer tab. I'll be happy to answer any of the questions. Otherwise, you can take the offline. You have all our numbers. We can set up the Zoom call with me. So you can go to the website and you can always take the things. Those of you who could not join it, we are recording this session. So we will circulate this session to you because of the festivals. I think today the numbers as we expect in every webinar slightly on the lower side. But wish you happy Diwali to you all. And I think we'll close it because I could not see any questions coming.
No
so
problem.
Thank you very much again, Dr. Donald Martin and Ms. Deborah, for a fantastic session today. And this all the 5 sessions what we have done is a series was really excellent, and it covers complete end-to-end undergraduate admission process. You get all the things which are there, and many of the things are common for the graduate application. What we say postgraduate applications also is same. So thank you very much, and really appreciate you all joining.
Thanks, everyone.